of extraterrestrial
A
origin.
large, hairy creature with arms that hang down beside bore down on its sides.
Finally happened. And I told him my name, and when I told him my name, he said he was called Code.
There's not anything from this earth that I'm quite sure of.
You're listening to the Strangeology podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Foran, and this is your place to explore the weird, strange, and unexplained. From cryptids and creatures, the paranormal, aliens and UFOs, forbidden knowledge, ancient mysteries, conspiracies, and more. Hey all, and welcome back to the Strangeology podcast. It's good to be back. Thanks for hanging out with me today. This is episode 1 of the 4th season of the show. It's kind of wild to me that Strangeology itself is going to be celebrating its 4th birthday this April. It's been a wild ride so far, and thank you all so much for joining me for this weird journey. But anyway, it seems like even though Punxsutawney Phil predicted an early spring for this year back on Groundhog's Day, we're still in it for the duration, at least for a few to several more weeks in New England at least, but that's par for the course for this part of the world. Normally this time of year, we get a big snowstorm around Valentine's Day, which we did get a storm, although it wasn't much of anything of note. And then historically, at least in my experience, mid-March around St. Paddy's Day, we usually get a big dump as well. So we'll see. I'm definitely looking forward to spring. Definitely feeling that cabin fever starting to set in. But I hope that wherever you are, wherever you're listening to the show from, that you're all warm and doing well. But enough of the weather. This year is shaping up for me to be vending at a number of different events. So definitely mark these on your calendars. And I've got a few more beyond these ones that I'm going to mention that are in the works. I just don't want to quite announce anything yet. But here's what I've got confirmed for now. I'll be at the Wytheville UFO Fest, and that's going to be in Wytheville, Virginia on Saturday, June 8th. Later that month, on Saturday, June 29th, I'm going to be vending at Monster Fest 2 in Canton, Ohio, which I'm super stoked for. Last year was an awesome time. And in August, on Saturday the 10th, I will be at Squonkapalooza in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which is hosted by Cryptid Comforts. And I'll be slinging my merch and hanging out at all these events. So definitely stop by my table if you're planning on attending any of them and say hi. We'll chat for a little bit, and I'll make sure to include website links for each of these events in the show notes for more information, tickets, and all that stuff. It's going to be good. And don't forget to put your podcasting apps on to auto download so you never miss a new episode. It's also super helpful for the show and very much appreciated if you leave a review. Apple Podcasts does have a review platform built in. Spotify, I know that there's a question and answer thing that I have set up there where people can leave comments as well. But Apple Podcasts is probably the go-to spot for that. But again, it's always super appreciated and helps out the show a lot. Now, the show is supposed to be on a bi-weekly release schedule, but sometimes life happens. And near the end of the last season of the show, I was having a real hard time keeping on to that schedule because of life things, curveballs, and all that. So if you're ever wondering why there hasn't been a new episode posted, make sure to follow me over on social media. I'm usually posting content there most days in the form of short form videos. I'm currently working through still a cryptids and legends iceberg, and pretty deep into it so far, but there's a lot more to cover. So if you want to check out more content from me beyond the podcast, that's definitely the place to do it. You can find me on Instagram. That's kind of my headquarters on social media, as well as Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. I also have an X and Threads as well, although I rarely post things on those platforms just because there's always so much going on. But as always, the links for all of that will be in the show notes. And if you ever have any other feedback, stories you want to share, or constructive thoughts, you can always DM me over on Instagram or send an email to info@strangeology.com. I look forward to hearing from you. And a couple more things before we get started here. I wanted to give a big welcome and shout out to new Patreon members, Michelle and Barbara. Thank you both so much for joining and for the support. If you want to support what I do with Strangeology, with the podcast, all the social media content, the YouTube channel, one way to do it is to become a member of my Patreon over at patreon.com/Strangeology. I've got a number of tiers with different benefits, all starting at as little as $1 per month. Some of the perks include shoutouts, voting power on topics for me to cover, behind the scenes looks at what I do, ad-free episodes, and early access to new episodes as well, along with access to Strangeology Beyond, which is the episode extension for members only. That's sometimes a whole other episode topic in and of itself. There's also exclusive merch, discounts to my Etsy shop, and even a T-shirt of the month club. It's a great time, and I hope to see you there. Again, that's patreon.com/Strangeology. Also, don't forget to check out my merch over at strangeology.etsy.com, where I've got a wide assortment of cryptid, alien, and otherwise Fortean designs on products like t-shirts, long sleeves, tank tops, sweatshirts, hoodies, stickers, magnets, pins, blankets, mugs, tumblers, hats, and probably more things that I'm forgetting. Again, that's strangeology.etsy.com. I appreciate the support. Well, why don't we get into the episode now? On this edition of the show, I brought on a very special guest, someone that I've been meaning to have on for quite a while, and finally had the opportunity to set something up and sit down and chat with none other than Seth Breedlove of Small Town Monsters, talking about how Small Town Monsters came to be, their process with filmmaking, strange experiences in the field, and what's coming up for STM in 2024. And just a quick note about the audio quality for this episode. There was some technical difficulties on my end for the recording, so my audio doesn't sound as good as it usually does. Seth's on the other end sounds fantastic. So just a quick note before we get started. All right, and with that out of the way, let's get into it. Enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Today I've got a very special guest with me, someone I've been wanting to have on for quite a while, the one and only Seth Breedlove. And just as a brief introduction, maybe you can add in a little bit more after, but Seth is a filmmaker and the mastermind behind Small Town Monsters, which if you're not familiar with, you should be at this point. They're an independent film company that's produced several very well done documentaries, miniseries on cryptids, strange local legends, paranormal stuff, UFOs. Some of the most recent releases they've done are The Dogman Triangle, Werewolves in the Lone Star State, and Land of the Missing, which is part of the On the Trail of Bigfoot series. But without further ado, thank you so much, Seth, for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I was editing the Dogman Territory movie, which is why I was late for hopping on here. So
No worries,
I'm
no
good.
worries.
I'm good. I haven't. We're in like this weird state as a company where we went for basically a year with pretty much like one kind of. I was editing kind of stuff I'd already had experience editing. It got a little boring, so I'm kind of excited about editing Dogman Territory because it's something new for me. Eli edited the first movie. And also, it's like our only sort of traditional STM movie coming out this year because everything else is like On the Trail of Bigfoot or Cryptid or Lost Contact, which is kind of unlike anything else we've made. So I'm excited to like get into this edit for some reason. I was on the phone yesterday with Brandon talking about music, and then we're bringing on like a sound designer again on this one. So it's one of those projects I've been also we shoot things so far out. Like Land of the Missing had been shot over a year before I actually got to edit it. So this one is relatively recent for me, so it's kind of fresh in my mind because we shot it back in like November.
Right on. Yeah. When the inspiration strikes, when you got to work on this stuff, I mean, at least in my experience, it's always nicer to get right into something. I always find if I get delayed on editing something or working on my own content and it takes a while to get back to it, it's just like, oh, like where was I with all
Yeah.
this stuff, for sure.
No, that's when I'm on a shoot too, I have all these ideas, and then if I don't write it down, it kind of goes away. And also, even if I do write it down, I lose the entire gist of what I was doing in the first place.
Yep.
So I find that it's way easier to go right from a shoot into the edit, but it hasn't happened. I can't remember the last time that would have actually happened. It's been a very, very long time. Maybe the YouTube stuff is kind of, we were shooting, like I did that Mountain State Monsters series this year, and that was like we would go film something and then I would edit it. But even then, like the interviews had been shot for almost a year. So the in the field stuff would be more recent, but the interviews themselves were far in the past. And then you also get into, with the episodic stuff, it gets tough because then I'm like trying to remember what I actually covered in the previous episode, which might have been edited like 2 or 3 months in the past.
Right. Yeah, the joys of directing and creating all this stuff. But I wanna ask you right off the bat, just for listeners out there who might not know, can you talk about, you know, the origin of story of Small Town Monsters? How did it all come to be? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the term Small Town Monsters was created in 2013. I had put together a book proposal for a book called Small Town Monsters, and it was going to be kind of like a case book and go through all these cases around the U.S., not just Bigfoot, but I know I had the Dover Demon in there, the Flatwoods Monster, Mothman were also involved, Bray Road might have been in there, Minerva Monster was the big one, Whitehall and the Falk Monster. I can't remember what else was on that initial. Maybe Momo. Momo was always a favorite of mine. So I had put that book proposal together while I was working my medical billing job, and I was also writing freelance for the newspaper at the time. Before I started doing filmmaking, I was a writer. So I had sent the proposal around to like all the known paranormal publishers, and they all rejected it. And so I kind of just left it sit for about a year. And then I met these two guys at a Bigfoot conference who had like film equipment, who wanted to make a documentary. And I talked about how I wanted to make a documentary. So we kind of linked up and started filming in July of 2014, our first movie, The Minerva Monster, which I had already done a lot of the preliminary work for that project while I was doing the book, because I had started writing the Minerva chapter of the book, and I had interviewed some of the members of the family, the Caton family, who were involved in the Minerva case. For anyone that doesn't know, the Minerva Monster was like this Bigfoot, ongoing Bigfoot report. You would almost call it like sort of one of the earliest cases of habituation. So right. This is like 1978, and the family was just having constant interaction with this creature coming down off the hill behind their house that had two babies as well. It was also occasionally seen with what some people described as like Black Panthers. I don't know if that's what people were actually seeing, or that they were seeing the young ones, because there is a report from around the same time by a guy, and it's actually in the movie, but he talks about seeing two little ones, but they would walk on all four. So on all four, on all fours. I used to be a writer, but the case like evolved over time. Eventually, the family called the police because this thing was kind of getting aggressive. It might have killed their dog. They called the police, and then after, it's like all these small town cases, they all have the same sort of blueprint, which is it hits the media and then it blows up locally. In the case of the Minerva monster, it blew up nationally. There were TV crews there from Japan and Germany that showed up too. So it was kind of a big story for a little while, but the town kind of forgot about it. But I had grown up aware of the Minerva monster just through kids in the town that I grew up in, Bolivar, which is about 20 miles west of, I don't even, as the crow flies, it's probably 10 miles, but you know, a 20-mile drive to Minerva. But everyone would say, like, don't go out in the woods after dark or the Minerva monster will get you. I had no idea what that was until I was in my 20s. But so I had done all this preliminary research. Me and these guys decided we were going to make a movie, and the movie was called The Minerva Monster. At the time, I was writing for local newspapers, so I used my media contacts to drum up a bunch of interest in the movie. And it exploded regionally anyway, here in Ohio. Like, there were probably 30 or 40 front page stories done about the Minerva monster. There was 3 just in Canton alone, you know, on the cover of the Canton Repository and stuff like that about the story. So we put together a festival based around premiering the movie, and then that kind of blew up as well. And we ended up with 1,200 people at the festival to watch this movie. And so we didn't make a dime on the movie, but we made back what we spent on it, which is kind of like the big deal. So we just took what we had spent and gotten back and put that into making Beast of Whitehall. Sometime during the creation of Beast of Whitehall, I got into a pretty serious argument, creative disagreement with the guys I was making that movie with, who had also made Minerva with me, and we split and went our separate ways. And that's kind of the creation of Small Town Monsters at that point. I just was like, well, we'll do this on our own. I went out and bought my own camera and started, you know, teaching myself how to film and edit. And Whitehall was the first thing I edited. Minerva was our first movie, but Beast of Whitehall was the first editing that I ever did. And you can tell if you can tell it's like the first movie I shot or edited. There's a lot of focus issues in that movie. But, you know, we just flipped what we made from movie to movie into the next movie. And we were doing Kickstarters during all that as well. And we just grew over time. Every year there's like a growth that happens within the company. And sometimes you see it and sometimes you don't. For the last 2 years, it's been really obvious, the growth that's happened, just because we started, you know, creating a staff in 2020. I guess it would have been 2021 is when we started hiring people regularly. And now we're up to 10 people, I guess now, to work here.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for the 101 on Small Town Monsters.
Yeah.
Was the Minerva case kind of, you mentioned, you know, you weren't really into or aware of a lot of like cryptid stuff growing up, but was the Minerva case really kind of like the catalyst that got you interested in all this stuff, or was there something else?
Yeah, it wasn't the catalyst. It's my favorite cryptid story, but it's not the catalyst. The catalyst is just boredom. And like, everything happened at like a really specific time in my life where I had gone through a divorce, and I was doing a lot of work at my church, and the guy that ran the soundboard at the church thought I was a weirdo like him. He was a weirdo. And he was like, this guy's weird. He must like paranormal and cryptid stuff. So he burned me a DVD of like documentaries he had recorded on television. One was about Bigfoot. All I remember about the one about Bigfoot is that it had Scott Harriet's Bigfoot footage in it. Which, if anyone knows, I know Scott. To me, I can't see anything in that footage, but a lot of people think that's like very good footage of Bigfoot. But I remember that was one. There was one about lake monsters because it had some stuff about Ogopogo, Champ, and Loch Ness in it. And then the other one was UFO related. And he gave it to me, and I watched it just because I was bored, and it clicked, and I was into it. And then I read, there's a book by Lauren Coleman and somebody else that's like a collection of Bigfoot cases, or like a Bigfoot case book or something like that.
Yeah.
Which probably played into my idea for my Small Town Monsters book. But I was reading that book, and that was when I read the entry on the Minerva monster, and then it kind of clicked, and then I was super fascinated by that, because it was like, well, this happened right down the road from my parents' house, and I remember hearing about this when I was a kid. And then what happened from there is the guy at church who had given me the DVD, he had a his dentist, this is weird, but like his dentist owned a ranch down in Bolivar, which is the town I grew up in. And she had told him, he had at some point while he was at the dentist apparently mentioned that he was into Bigfoot, the topic. And she was like, oh, you should come down to my ranch sometime. We see him all the time. And so he ended up interviewing her about, not interviewing, but, like kind of getting the full story on it, which was that I've talked about this recently, but this is the weirdest Bigfoot case I've ever actually heard, because I've met the witnesses and they're so believable. The husband of this lady, the dentist, was the DA in the district attorney in Canton. So like, and she has this like really prominent practice. Her kids run the practice now. I think she retired, but very believable. So the story goes that like basically, as long as they've owned this property, they've been encountering Bigfoot in the woods behind their house, and not just like one Bigfoot, but a family of Bigfoots, like young. So, and it gets so crazy that like she's claimed that they can feed them, and they'll follow them on horseback into the woods. And there's a cave back there that they live in. And I've never been to the property. I haven't even been able to actually figure out which ranch is theirs back there. But the interesting thing about that road, so all this happened on St. Peter's Church Road, which is a little road just south of Bolivar, headed down towards Strasburg. For anyone familiar with Don Keating, he was an Ohio Bigfoot researcher. He put together this Sasquatch triangle, like a map of Sasquatch, sightings that seem to create basically Ohio's version of the Dogman Triangle, only with Sasquatch.
Sure.
And the northern tip of that is the village of Strasburg, which is just south of Bolivar. So it was interesting to me that there was a history of sightings in this area. And then I went back there for myself. And anyone that's watched On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Legend, I think the first episode actually opens on that road with us talking about all this. But I would go down there. At the time I was working for my parents in Bolivar. And so on my lunch break, I would drive down to St. Peter's Church Road and park and walk the road. And one day I talked to an elderly couple I saw walking down the road and asked them if they had ever experienced anything. And they kind of like laughed it off at first, but then the guy was like, well, in the 70s, there were all sorts of sightings down here. When he proceeded to tell me about sightings that had happened on that road. And in fact, he had found a deer ripped in half and stuffed up in a tree in the 70s. But he also told me there were UFO sightings and all this stuff down there. And I do know, as a kid, we grew up in Bolivar, but behind my parents' house is in a neighborhood, but behind their house is this big field, and then the Tuscarawas River, and then on the other side of the river is St. Peter's Church Road. And I do remember as a kid, there were stories about satanic cults and stuff in the woods behind the, down by the river and all this stuff. So there's definitely a lot of lore connected with that area. We actually filmed the posse sequence from Momo back in there.
Oh, gotcha.
But so anyway, that was like my first time talking to a witness, was like talking to these two older people. I thought there was a lot to the story. I didn't know if there were still Bigfoot in the area, but I was totally on board with that being like suitable habitat, mostly because that property, that land all around that road and French Hill Road and all that, was privately owned, and most of it was formerly strip mined, and there were caves all over back in there.
Gotcha.
So and a lot of anyone that did live in the area owned a farm or a ranch that butted up against that area. In fact, there still is a huge, like maybe 100 acres, something like that, of property that's owned by a wolf rehabilitation place. So they bring wolves in and they, you know,
Yeah.
rehab them.
Yeah, we have a
So
place like that in New England, like I
yeah,
think in southern New Hampshire or Massachusetts. I went there on a field trip once when I was a kid.
yeah,
But anyway,
it's really interesting, and the area, it's just like if you go to, now if you go there today, they started selling parcels of it off, and now it's like kind of grown up back there. There's actually a development that butts right up against it, but it still is kind of creepy at night. It doesn't look like Ohio, at least not the Bolivar part of Ohio. It looks like you're in West Virginia, like big hills, deep hollers, a lot of creeks and things like that. And it's just on the other side of the river from my parents' house.
wow, that's super interesting that,
Mhm.
you grew up in this area that has all this activity going on.
Yeah.
And really it's kind of it seems that whole area, West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, is
Hmm.
just like this hot spot of all this high strangeness.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I mean, small town monsters really, what you're doing stays true to the namesake
Hmm.
of the company. Uh, you cover a lot of lesser known events and cryptids that people have reportedly encountered over the
Hmm.
years. Why do you think that small towns lend themselves so well to these types of legends and folklore? And why does all this stuff seem to happen in these smaller areas?
I mean, I think it happens everywhere, but I think the media plays a huge part in it, to be to be 100% honest.
Fair, yeah.
Like I think not that this stuff doesn't happen, but it does seem like when it happens in a small community, the local newspapers get involved pretty quick. At least they did, in the 70s. And if you think about like when the height of like monster hysteria was, it was the 70s. It was like the mid to late 70s is like a lot of the cases that we still talk about today happened in that time frame, and specifically between like 72 and 78. I don't know what it is about that, but I think the community gets involved in a way that, like especially a small town where everyone kind of knows everyone, the word spreads pretty quickly, and so there's that, and eventually if the town is smart enough, they'll capitalize on that, in the way that Point Pleasant did, or Falk. But then you have your Minervas where they completely ignore it, 40, 50 years later, and don't really want anything to do with it too. So it kind of depends. Like if the community will embrace it, I feel like they're doing the lion's share of making sure that story stays alive. If they kind of like don't care, it will eventually disappear, regardless of how many television shows or whatever are made about it. But you do have places like Roswell or whatever where they understand it and they see the value in it. Whether or not the story actually happened is kind of like irrelevant. Like if there's any truth to it or not is kind of irrelevant. It's important to document that aspect of a town's history, and I think that's overlooked a lot of the time. People want, especially now that we've focused more on YouTube, you really see how much the audience, the people out there that are into this stuff, they don't necessarily care about the history of it. They want evidence. Everything is like, where's the evidence that this happened? Or
Yeah, what's
and
the
I've never
source,
been,
bro?
yeah, and I've never been that interested in that. Like I love the stories and I like to tell them and be a part of telling them. And it says something about the culture of these communities and things like that too. So there's loftier reasons for doing it, but at the end of the day, I just like a good story, and I think that's what drew me to all this to begin with. Was just, I grew up in a family of storytellers. It like runs back to my dad's family. As far as I know, they were like big time storytellers in the hills of North Carolina in the middle of nowhere. So it had to have been passed down from there. But I'm drawn to the stories more so than, the evidence of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole study of cryptozoology and anything paranormal is largely it's kind of a big part of being human is
Hmm.
storytelling, and it really ties into the culture, like you said.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Now, I'm curious, Seth. How do you go about deciding which towns, which stories uh, that you're going to tackle? What's the process of that like?
It's changed a lot because of Heather, and I guess Aaron now too, because Aaron is coming on full time with SDM in a story capacity. Um, so yeah, but it's definitely morphed. I mean, I went from, Minerva. It was it was right down the road from where I lived. We made that movie for $500. So it was, it's right down the road. Whitehall came about because the day we premiered Minerva at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, I found out that one of the original witnesses had died. One of the
Mm,
original Whitehall witnesses had died, and so I was just like, "We better do this now because it might not happen." Um, so we made that, and then Falk was just a natural to go do, and then Mothman just kind of like obviously. The one that was weird was Invasion on Chestnut Ridge, because that was literally like Mark and I just really liked Stan Gordon and
yeah,
and and the general vibe of that area, and I had an idea to like really go all in on like a style that mirrored like unsolved mysteries and the stuff we grew up with. So that one just fell that way. But I don't know. I always say the way I personally am drawn to a story is through the people involved, not the monster or the phenomenon or whatever. Um, I can't think of a movie I've made where I went into it because I was like, I have to make a Flatwoods movie. Maybe Momo, but even that one, like what really drew me into that once I found out the full story of it was what, how it impacted the family, how the family basically wants nothing to do with the Momo story anymore because of the ridicule they received and that kind of thing. So I'm
sure.
always drawn to the human side of it more so than anything. And then if I have like a fun idea for how to tell the story, like Jersey Devil, I can't say necessarily that I was drawn to any human element of that because it's a movie that is comprised of interviews with experts. There isn't, as far as I remember, there's not a single witness in our Jersey Devil movie. It's sort of experts talking about, you
Right.
know, the history of that. But I had an idea for how to take, how to marry like narrative sections of the movie and then tie it back into the doc part. So that was why we made that Jersey Devil movie. Um, yeah, typically it's the people and the people stories more so than like any one monster. I mean, I've been watching because we're re-releasing On the Trail of UFOs on YouTube, and we're getting ready to do a season 2 of On the Trail of UFOs. And the whole point of On the Trail of UFO season 1 is to shift the focus back to like the witnesses, because right now everything is about the hearings going on in Washington and politics of it, and then you've got the UFO community just eating itself on Twitter or whatever,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's what they do. And so the whole point of that show is like, let's put the focus back on the people who've actually claimed to see something, maybe, whether they're a military vet or not, because right now that's the hot thing. It's kind of like, like if an Air Force pilot has seen something, then that takes precedence over 20 other reports that come in. So I think at the end of the day, I'm much more interested in the people involved in the stuff than I am in the phenomena itself, whatever it might be. But I do love, one thing I'm really excited about this year is that we're delving back into a lot of the lesser known subjects. Like Alex is doing Strange Places now, which is basically like a look at more of the bizarre history of places rather than any one topic.
Yeah.
And he's still going to do Bigfoot Beyond the Trail, but Like Strange Places is going to be that. Eli's doing an Ogopogo movie. Lost Contact is about the Thomas Mantell case, which is a well-known case within the UFO world, but outside of it, I don't know that people are super aware of that. And then this Dogman Territory thing, like Land Between the Lakes, is something that we know within the community, but outside of it, no one has a clue what that is. I mean, LBL is not exactly a well attended national recreation area at all. Like there's hardly anyone there. And so shining the light, I mean, we're doing a special for YouTube this year that's about mermaids. So there's a lot of like the smaller topics that we kind of had to put on hold for a couple of years just because of the growth that was going on within the company. And also it's been a nightmare, like dealing with distributors. So we had to be very cognizant of like, this has to make money or we might go under. But now I think this year, especially, we're to a place where we can experiment more and start covering a lot of the smaller topics that we kind of like started out with. I mean, it's not like anyone knew what the Minerva monster was or even the Beast of Whitehall. Which like that, the Beast of Whitehall name is a name we gave to the movie. No one had ever called Beast of Whitehall. But now I see like that has caught on. Like that is what people know it as, is the Beast of Whitehall.
Yeah.
But originally we were going to call it what the newspapers called it, but I think that might've just been like the Whitehall creature or something like that. But if you look, there's only one newspaper article I could find that actually referred to it as a beast. And I don't know that there's anything that I found that directly called it the Beast of Whitehall until the movie came out. So I think that's fun.
Gotcha. Yeah. I'm not far from Whitehall myself. Just like a couple hours.
I love it there.
They do the festival in the fall, which I've gone to a couple times now. It's great. It's you go down to these small towns that have these legends, and if you're there, I mean, you guys, the team goes out, you go on location, and a lot of the times when you're in these places, you can feel it, kind of. It's
I haven't had that. People tell me that the weirdness factor rarely happens for me. There are exceptions, like, I mean, going to the TNT area in Point Pleasant and then tell me there isn't a weird vibe to that place. But, like for the most part, when I go to a place, I end up falling in love with it for other reasons entirely. Like even Point Pleasant, the first time, everyone kept telling me when you go to Point Pleasant, there's a real weird vibe. It's like real spooky. And I went there and sat on the banks of the Ohio River where the Ohio meets the Kanawha River. And I felt it was like a very peaceful spot. And my whole life, like I've not my whole life, but since I started going there, that's kind of the vibe I get there. I had looked into moving there at one point. Like I just really like the place. The biggest exception to that would be the Land Between the Lakes. Like I was just talking to Brandon yesterday about this, but like when you're approaching LBL, 20 minutes out, there's just a weird vibe or whatever about that whole area that stays with you the entirety of the time you're there. And I don't quite understand it. It's definitely a weird place. Whether it's the history of the area itself, and like I'm aware of this Dogman stuff, and so because of that, you're more cognizant of it, or if it's the other history of the area, which is like people being run out of their homes, and 2,000 some people were displaced in that area,
right?
And so Joe and Jesse, I think it was Jesse who talked about this from Hellbent Holler. Jesse had a really good way of putting it, which was like, it's almost like the sadness and the blood spilled over the years in that place is like seeped into the ground itself, and like it's just prevalent everywhere you go. But there's a weird vibe to that place for sure.
It definitely seems like it. And Jesse and Joe have been on my show before, and just like hearing about what they've gone through, hearing some other accounts, it's places like that where it's just kind of like in the soil, and
Mhm.
you can't really quantify it or explain
Yeah.
it. It's definitely weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I wanted to circle back because you mentioned you're doing some follow-ups with uh things you've done before. Do you have any plans to do like follow-ups like you did with Mothman, like Mothman Legacy, to any of the other stories, or are those kind of closed book and you're just kind of moving on to new topics?
I mean, the well, on the Trail of UFOs, but that's a series, so it's a little different. That was always supposed to be episodic. It's just we had to shift into making those into movies because the distributor didn't want to distribute episodic series. But now that we've kind of regained control of our own future at this point, we're able to do it. American Werewolves 2 is about to come out on March 15th, finally. Kickstarter backers saw it months ago, but the general public hasn't seen it yet. That's definitely revisiting, the whole Dogman phenomenon through that like 80s filtered lens that we did with the first one. Dogman Territory is a sequel, but I can't think of anything else that I've talked about recently that would be a sequel. I will tell you, my son is obsessed with our Flatwoods monster movie and watches
Nice.
it like probably a couple times a week. And I have promised him that at some point I will make like a narrative Flatwoods monster movie. So that would be revisiting something. But there's nothing I can think of that's like a direct sequel on the table right now. Mothman Legacy, a lot of people don't know this, but Mothman Legacy was a massive flop. Like the Mothman of Point Pleasant is one of the biggest, if not the biggest movie we ever made.
Yeah.
Mothman Legacy came out as the first release that we did under our old distributor, and they kind of I'd never worked with like a big distributor before, and they kind of did this whole marketing campaign that ended up I had to pay for, which I didn't realize. And so the movie came out and did not do gangbusters by any stretch of the imagination. And so that ended up being like a massive flop for us, which I don't think is necessarily because of the topic or anything, but because of that, I've always been leery of doing like direct sequels to the sort of like, the small town monster movies. Because I kind of like think of it, and I mean, this is getting expanded on every year or two as more and more people come in, but I kind of think of our movies as like two different types. You have the traditional small town monster feature films, which are Mothman Legacy, Bray Road Beast, Minerva, like the classic like focus on a small town and its monster. And then there's the more like on the trail of approach, which is a lot of like in the field stuff, less of a focus on a community, much more of a focus on the people involved and things like that. That'd be like On the Trail of Bigfoot. And I guess Dogman Territory and Dogman Triangle are kind of nice because they kind of marry the two approaches. And especially with Dogman Territory, the one I'm working on, I really want to try to bring in like a new approach to that kind of marries, you're actually tracking with investigators, but you're also hearing these stories and experiencing the area and the history of the area. While those movies, the traditional small town monsters movies, were also sort of known for what we were spending, especially for being really high production value. So I wanted to try to do that, with Dogman Territory as well. So I don't remember the question. I just rambled for like
No,
5 minutes.
that's great. I love it. I love it. What are some of the biggest the hurdles and challenges that you run into with filming all of these movies? I know you've mentioned the distributor a few times being kind of a thorn in your side recently, but what are some of the logistical challenges that you find yourself dealing with?
That's a really good question. Honestly, anymore, it's the fact that we 2 years ago, we did this Alaska shoot, and it was 17 days, which is the longest shoot we've ever done. In that time, we managed to get 2 movies shot and 3 episodes of Alex's BTT. but we did that in 17 days. We just finished up the Dogman Territory shoot in November. It was a 3-day shoot. We shot the entire movie. We shot 2 episodes of a Sasquatch Unearthed miniseries, and then Alex got like 3 episodes out of BTT and Strange Places as well. And we did that in 3 days. So for me, it's actually been, let's focus, or let's find a way to be in the field less, as crazy as that sounds, because, you know, the fact is we all have family. Like I have a son, Courtney has a daughter, Heather has kids, like a lot of the crew, you know, is either married or dating or engaged or have children. And so the days of being gone for like 17 days without it being a problem are over.
Yes.
So our biggest challenge is just balancing, you know, work and family life. I think I know that's my biggest challenge. Because you kind of like it was so, starting out doing this was so romantic. Like the entire thing just seemed, in the early days, was so crazy. Because I'd pack my bags and I'd leave for like 5-6 days with my buddies, and we'd go film a movie in the woods, and you're like, oh, I'm a filmmaker. Oh, but the reality of what that does over the span of 10 years, which is what we're at now, is like, it's a lot of time away. You know, when you have a 6-year-old, I don't really want to miss anything. He has basketball practice on Thursdays and basketball games on Saturdays. And so I try to like plan my time around that. And so it's actually been, the biggest thing for us has been shortening the time that we're in the field. But when you've got a team of like 10 people who can show up in a place and do everything, you know, like we're kind of operating on muscle memory at this point. You know, it's much more possible. I think, you know, when I was handling it, actually getting people to agree to do interviews and then scheduling those interviews was the biggest part of pre-production. Oftentimes I would get to a shoot with no idea of what the style of the movie was, or, you know, like would have been very little planning that went into like what gear we were taking or any of that stuff, because you spend so much time trying to convince people to do an interview.
Yeah, I was going to ask, you know, how do you go about finding locals and people who are willing to talk? You know, it seems like in these rural towns, a lot of people don't want to give up their secrets and share their stories with outsiders. You know, what's that been like during this whole thing?
The best thing about the company right now is I don't have to deal with it anymore.
Oh.
that's Heather's job. So, I mean, when I was doing it, it was literally finding people that were connected to the case. You know, with the, like, Beast of Whitehall, there were names. There was Brian Gosselin, and there was Bill Brand, and there was, you know, Paul Bartholomew kind of came along later, wasn't there during the initial stuff. But those were the 3 guys who I contacted during the initial phase of, like, you know, researching that movie. And it was a lot of phone call time and convincing them that I was capable of telling the story. I spend a lot of time too. I don't know. I know Heather does this too. You spend more time just talking to these people about things not at all related to their experience than you do actually talking about the experience. It's kind of like, you just are earning their trust, I guess.
Sure.
You know, you're going through this whole process of, you can trust me to not make you look like a fool, you know, on camera or whatever. So that was the biggest thing for me. And I know Heather and I approach it a little differently. Heather uses social media way more than I did. I didn't use social media. I would use newspaper articles or magazine articles or whatever. And then I would literally use like White Pages premium to go find people's phone number and then track them down that way and talk to them, you know. And I think Heather has a much probably less intrusive approach to it than I did. So I don't know though. I'm aware, like when we're talking about pre-pro on a movie and coming up with a story, we talk a lot about who's going to be involved, but there does come a point where Heather just starts adding names to these lists, and I have no idea who the people are till we get to the location and meet them. So that's different. And sometimes it's a challenge because I'm used to knowing their story going into it and kind of knowing I got to get from point A to point B. And now it's kind of like learning their story during the shoot itself, which is, a different approach to things. But at the same time, she's alleviated so much of the stress that goes into a shoot by being there, and being the one that does that.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's definitely great to have Heather as a resource to take that burden off your plate.
Mhm.
As as things go on and things grow, you can only do so much as one person. So,
Yeah.
definitely kudos there for her taking that on. I'm wondering, what are some of the wildest or most interesting stories that you've heard from witnesses over the years? Can you share a couple?
Yeah. The most, I mean, maybe it's just because it's more present on my mind because we just interviewed him again, but Martin Grove's encounter from the land
Yes.
between the lakes is really, it's the wildest because he is such a believable witness. And then it's also wild just because the story has some real twists and turns.
Yeah, he was
I
at
mean,
Monster Fest last year, right? And
yeah,
Jeremiah from Bigfoot Society talked to him. Yeah.
yeah. And, but we were the first people to interview him. Heather found him just randomly. He wanted nothing to do with this stuff, didn't want to tell the story. And she somehow convinced him to come on camera in American Werewolves. We were the first people to interview him. And that was thanks to Heather. So Martin's story involves an encounter in the land between the lakes that, I mean, it's hard to put it into, it's a very sprawling story. I mean, over the course of like 2 days and with multiple sort of encounters along the way, but it boils down to he was escorted out of a camping area by Bigfoots, apparently to save him from dogmans that were stalking them. So, I mean, just saying it sounds wild, but when you
Yeah.
hear him tell it, I mean, he's a very, very believable witness. Now, when we shot Dogman Territory, he actually took us to the location where all this happened, which is pretty crazy. We went to the site where all of that happened. And he broke down in tears during that interview. So yeah, he's probably one of them. The one that stands out, maybe this is another thing where my son has been watching Terror in the Skies a lot. And one of the stories, I can't remember the witness's name, but it involves seeing a pterodactyl while he was, I think, duck hunting or pheasant hunting, something like that, with a friend. Sees like a pterodactyl. Him and his friend both saw it. Very believable witness. Really wild story, but kind of in line with the winged cryptids that seem to inhabit Illinois.
Yeah.
So those two are the ones that stand out as being the most, I guess the standouts for me. I don't know why. It is weird. Like when you consider, I've done probably 100 witness interviews. I've conducted close to 300 interviews, but I would say well over half that is investigators and things like that. But at least 100 witness interviews, if not more. So I don't know what it is about specific stories that will stand out, over time in a way that others don't. Especially when it comes to like specific encounters that were had and things like that. I think it's just like the movies. I'm drawn to the people more than, Freddie May, Fred May and Ed May from Flatwoods will always be one of my favorite experiences because Ed had never told his story on camera. And we convinced them, I kind of tricked him. He owned a house that was a Civil War. He lives near, what is the place called? He lives near Greenbrier in West Virginia.
Okay.
But his house is like a historical house. My dad was a Civil War buff back in the day, and my mama owned a historical bookstore. And so I tricked Ed into being in the movie by bringing my dad along to interview Fred because Fred was staying at Ed's house. My dad and Ed hit it off. and then I asked Ed if he would be in the movie, and my dad kind of interjected, "I think you should do it," and he did it. So that was how I got those interviews. But that, that's probably my favorite interview I've ever conducted, just because I was able to be there. And now Fred's gone, so and so having that story captured is really good, especially because we didn't do what all the other television shows did, which was kind of make it seem like they saw a green lizard creature that was 12 feet tall. Like that's not at all what they said they saw. So
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's an awesome thanks for that. Are there certain topics, cryptids or UFOs, that you find the small towns audience resonating with more? Are there people that reach out there like, hey, you need to cover more of this or that? Or
well, yeah, I mean, this is where things have gotten irritating in the last year. So
oh no.
so the audience that built up around small town monsters, I think, was there because of some of the lesser known cryptids. Like Mothman really popped off for us because it wasn't something that was super in the mainstream at the time. It is now, but in 2016, 2017, when that movie came out, the festival was kind of just getting rolling. I think the attendance that year was like 10,000. So we were like ahead of the curve, right before like all the television networks started covering it and everything. People loved Mothman, and they kept begging for more Mothman, which made it even more bizarre when Mothman Legacy came out and no one watched it. But I would say, the largest audience that we have is here for Bigfoot, and then you have another segment of the audience that's here for the weirder stuff. Bigfoot and Dogman year to year seems to be like the go-to. Like we can put that stuff out and it will do well. And then everything else is kind of hit and miss. But ultimately, I don't want us to be cornered into only doing Bigfoot and Dogman content. And that's where we were headed last year. And it just we didn't become a company that way. Some of our biggest successes were movies that were not about like well-known topics. We did Terror in the Skies was a huge success, which it by all rights should not have been a huge success. It's a movie about giant birds. Like we leaned into the Mothman thing to promote it, but it's mostly about, Thunderbird sightings. And we did that, I did that just by deciding this is the movie I want to make. This is a topic I'm interested in. I want to do something that focuses a little bit on Lauren Coleman and his place in cryptozoology. And, and that movie came out and was a success. But then we do stuff like Momo, where it's about Bigfoot, but it's really weird. Like it's a really weird movie. And, it comes out and half the audience got it and half the audience hated it. So
yeah, you kind of filmed it in a style that was, like Lyle was in it, right? And
everything was very like meta. It was a very meta movie because it was a commentary on those 70s horror movies, like the 70s creature movies that we all love, and how they kind of overwrite the actual history, how film can kind of overwrite, or pop culture in general can kind of overwrite the actual history of these stories. It was also kind of a parody of television stuff like Monsters and Mysteries on TV. We were kind of parodying Lyle. Lyle was kind of parodying himself in that movie. And so you kind of had to be, it was very inside baseball. Like you had to get what we were going for to actually like the movie. And like I said, some people did and some people don't. And so the thing I have found is like the movies that are narrative heavy seem to not connect. Because we've made two of those that were heavily narrative, Momo and Jersey Devil, and neither of those ever found an audience. And And so that has kind of informed my approach to this stuff anyway. I think going forward, the movies will be just a documentary, or they will be a narrative, because there is going to come a point where we're going to start making narrative movies as a company. So rather than try to marry the two too heavily, I'm trying to step back from that and focus on, is this a documentary or is it a narrative? And so, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. There's so much stuff that goes into, the evolution. Sometimes you got to throw something at the wall, see if it sticks.
Yeah. I mean, we've operated that way. Everything we've done is trial and error, because, when we started out, there was no one doing what we're doing. And I still say today, there's no one doing what we're doing on the scale we're doing it. Just because we have movies, we have episodic content, we have books, we have podcasts, and it's all done independently, which is the way, if you're going to want to get this stuff in a way that is digestible to people who are actually into it, rather than just like the general audience that like television networks are going after, it's got to be independents like you or, me. It's got to be us that actually give the audience what they want.
Right. Yeah. Making something that's more digestible and relatable for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My next question for you is, obviously you're taking a step back from being in the field so much, but over the years being out in the field, have you ever run into situations where you've found evidence beyond talking with witnesses and experts? Have you ever been out there during filming and something weird or scary happens that you're like, wait a second, like what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, until 2020, no, it just never happened. We never had anything happen. There were odd things that happened. Like I remember once being with my mom in one of the TNT bunkers, and she saw something flying around in the bunker, and tried to take a picture of it, and all that came out on the picture was like this white blur, and it was really, really weird because it was completely dark in that bunker. So that was weird. But no, until 2020, I don't think much of anything happened. And then we did well, there was the incident in Oklahoma, I guess, and that was 2018. So that's not correct. But I was I went into Area X in Oklahoma with the NAWAC, the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. They had this location in Oklahoma, in the Ouachita National Forest that is, they've been going in there for like 20 years, and they spend months out of the year in there in shifts. And I was allowed to go in with Brian Brown and Daryl Collier, Kathy Strain, and Bob Strain back in 2018. And it was Adam and I went in, and we we experienced a lot of weirdness over the course of like 2.5, 3 days. But it culminated the night before we left, literally like 6 hours before we left the area. We had a rock throw that, middle of the night, 2 a.m. We were just falling asleep. We had a rock impact the metal outbuilding of, they have like a metal outbuilding there that they call the hooch. So this rock hits the hooch, wakes me up, and then there was a very loud whoop followed by laughter that went for like 10 seconds. The closest thing I can approximate it to would be a gibbon, like gibbon laughter. And so that was the weirdest. Yeah, that was the weirdest thing that had happened to me in the field. And then in 2021, I had a Bigfoot sighting at Heather's property while we were filming the Bigfoot project, like a broad daylight sighting of this thing running on a hill. Probably the weirdest thing that's happened was 2022. I think it was 2022. the beginning of the year, we were down on the Chestnut Ridge filming for Sasquatch Unearthed the Ridge, and it was I think 4 of us from the STM crew were there, and then we were out with some investigators from PA, and we all saw multiple lights, like orbs in the woods. Which is really weird, but the weirdest part about it was that this also happened to Zach, who was like our most skeptical member of the crew. Kind of laughs all of this off, honestly. He saw lights like very, very close to him, and kind of freaked him out. We caught some of that on camera too, so that was interesting.
Wow.
That's probably the weirdest thing. Those are probably the big 3, like the big weirdest things we've had happen.
Yeah, ghost lights are something else for sure.
Yeah, you expect you go to these places and you expect stuff to happen, and you almost have to get to a point where you're desensitized to it, or everything will be something. And so I'm sure there's an element of that. I might have been around weird stuff happening more than that, but I'm so used to, I remember going to Whitehall and going out to Abear Road and walking into the field out to where they would have been when they had the encounter. And the entire time you're there, we're there at night. We would just go out there and sit on Abear Road because we were hoping for something to happen. And you're very aware of that history when you're in those places. So it's almost like you almost have to turn that part of your brain off. So you're not just constantly looking for activity, because otherwise everything that happens, you're going to associate with like Bigfoot or whatever phenomenon you're chasing at the time.
Sure.
Falco's the same way. Like, I mean, you go down into the river bottoms at night, and there's every sound is like, what's that?
You hear a twig snap,
it's like every single thing happening down in there is going to be Bigfoot, just because you're so aware of like the legend of Boggy Creek and all that stuff. But you do get to a point where, you know what, there was another one. There was one other incident that I've only talked about this a couple times, but Brandon and I were filming a Japanese television show back in 2017 in the TNT area. And it was I say Brandon and I, but a bunch of the crew were there that night. It was a really weird experience. We were in Point Pleasant for 5 days with this crew. We were out, camping in the TNT area and all this stuff. Brandon and I had something happen in there that was much more Bigfoot centric related than Mothman. It was like, we heard like weird samurai chatter, and then something threw a rock at us. And that was a really weird incident. Mostly because we were being hoaxed by a television crew at the same time that this was happening. So it was like they were trying to get us to go. They had a guy set up in a tree, and we already knew what was happening, so we were refusing to go along with it.
Oh,
they had a guy hiding in a tree, waiting to jump out. That was like half a mile away from us, and they were desperately trying to get us to go back to that spot. But we were having something happen out in this other part of the TNT area. And so we were refusing to go with them. They eventually left us. They left Brandon and I in this spot.
Weird.
We would not leave because we were having rocks being thrown off these hills at us.
And it wasn't this crew that was messing with you.
No, the crew was down. The crew took half of my people and then the rest of them and went off toward their setup hoax thing. And we're perpetrating that while we were having this other stuff happen about a half mile away. So really odd. One of the weirdest things about that is so basically, like, Brandon and I are on this path in the middle of nowhere in the TNT area. We hear this chatter. We kill our lights. The crew's gone by this point. We kill our headlamps, and you heard something jump off the hill onto the path in front of us and then start thumping toward us. So we turn our lights on. There's nothing there. We got pretty spooked. This is like one of the first things I'd had happen in the field. We got kind of spooked. We ended up leaving the woods and going into this huge open field, and it's probably like 200 yards, like from one end of this field to the other, maybe bigger. And in the middle of the field is this giant rotted out tree. And right as we're getting near this tree, walking toward this tree, a rock from the woods 70 yards or more behind us, this rock comes out and impacts this tree right by us, which is really weird. Like, that was a weird experience in general. But because of the fact that we were in there with this TV crew that was hoaxing, we don't talk about it much because the story's so ridiculous. It's also hard to explain that, like, this TV crew was hoaxing, but we're pretty convinced they weren't hoaxing this, and then explaining why that's the case. And we just sound kind of crazy, so we just don't talk about it much.
Right. Yeah. That's such a weird experience. I've only ever been to the TNT area once, and it was right after CryptidCon, and I guess it was hunting season because I went in there and there's hunters.
I've been in there
it's
during
like,
that.
I'm not going to go to any of the bunkers right now. I wanted to circle back though to that other daytime sighting that you had. Can you elaborate on, what exactly happened?
Yeah. So yeah, we were, so the Bigfoot Project is a series. It was 5 episodes. We did it on YouTube. It'll come out on Tubi and our Fast channel this year as well. But Heather moved onto this property down near Minerva back in 2020 or 2021. She had almost immediately started having odd experiences on the property. It's worth noting that her mother-in-law lives 2 miles down the road or a mile down the road at the end of the same road that this property's on, and it had a sighting back in like 2017 of a Bigfoot during the middle of winter. So we were on this, we were aware of all this property and the activity that had been going on. The initial idea was to get Alex and Eli there for a Beyond the Trail that would kind of focus on her mother-in-law's sighting and some of the other weird stuff that had happened there. So we did that. We made a Beyond the Trail there. Had some weird strangeness, but nothing crazy. The craziest thing that happened was a wood knock that went off outside the cabin one night at like 2 a.m. that woke me up. Other than that, it wasn't anything insane. Alex and Eli had heard someone run on 2 feet past their tent at like 3 o'clock in the morning one night. But nothing crazy. So the idea was we were going to do this show called The Bigfoot Project that would be kind of like a podcast mixed with an investigative component. So we would have a guest out to Heather's property each week, or each episode. We would interview them by the fire, and then we would go out and investigate the property with them. So the first episode was going to be just Heather and I talking about the history of the property, and then showing the property, showing the lay of the land. Then the first night we were out there was not a filming night, really. We were just kind of hanging out. We had pizza. All the kids were out there. And we had tons of activity. There were wood knocks going off all over. Heather and I were approached on this trail by something. We had a rock thrown past our head. It was insanity. The most activity in like one short span of time I've ever had. Like, they did not care that we knew they were there. Like, it was short of having a visual. They would approach us within 10 feet, like right off this trail.
Wow.
So that was pretty wild. The next day I bought all these trail cameras. And the next day I wanted to hang the trail cameras up around the property at specific locations where like we knew deer traveled or there was a water source or something. And so we were out, in a gator, like an ATV, driving around the property, and we were crossing a pipeline that was clear cut up beside this hill, and it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, sunny as could be. And I looked up the clear cut as we were driving across, and this dark brown figure was just sprinting across the clear cut into the woods, covered in hair, not fur, or not vice versa, covered in fur, not hair. Like, it looked like a real hairy dog, running on two legs. I could see muscle moving in the arm, as it was like pumping because it was sprinting. And it was maybe 1 second or less that I had an eye on this thing before it crossed into the woods.
Wow.
I jumped out of the gator and then ran down to the brush line because there was like 6 foot tall thorns that were covering this clear cut, which was really weird at the time because what I saw seemed to be running on top of the thorns. Like it was like what I saw was up this hill, maybe 50, 70 yards away from us, and it was running, but it seemed to be just running on a path or something, but there was no path visible. So about a week later, the people that tend the property came out and clear cut, brush hog that clear cut, and we were able to go up to where the thing had been running, and it turns out there's a path right there. So what I saw was a clear cut path. It's actually like a dirt road that runs from there, from the neighboring farm down to the other part of their property. There's a dirt road. It runs right past what we came to call the boneyard, which is like this area where there's like 100 dead cows that have been dumped. So, you know, there might be something to that, but that was my visual. It was like less than a second, just enough time to be real frustrating that I didn't, you just wish you had seen it
Right.
face to face or something like that.
Did you have any idea of how tall it was?
It wasn't very tall because I've gone to the location where it was running and I could kind of picture where it was when I went into the woods, and there's a tree there with a limb that juts out over it, and it was under that. So I'm thinking it wasn't much taller than me. Is probably just over 6 foot.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm thinking of Finding Bigfoot when they tell Bobo to go up next to the tree and estimate because he's real tall.
No, and it's like it's the opposite of what I expected a Bigfoot sighting to be, because I've always heard they're covered in hair, like long stringy hair.
Yes.
Like, this looked like real short fur, like it had fur head to toe.
Yeah, more orangutan-like, ape-like, not just
sure
human hair.
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. And the biggest thing, people are like, well, it was probably a person hoaxing you, but then, I can guarantee you in Ohio farm country, you don't go onto other people's property and run around in a fursuit.
Yeah, it's probably a bad idea to do that.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah, it was really weird.
Yeah. So when you started all this stuff, what percentage of you believed that any of this was real versus now, after having seen stuff and experienced things yourself?
For me, it's been a roller coaster, because I started out probably believing everything. And then it changed a little because you start to interview a lot of the people that are telling you this stuff, and some of them are not believable, like face to face. Not necessarily people I've interviewed for the movies, but I'm talking, when you do events and you get some lady coming up telling you that Bigfoot visits her every night in her bedroom, like you start to realize there's a lot of people that are in this stuff who are in it for the wrong reasons or just are mentally unbalanced. And so there was an element of like lack of evidence too, because I had, like I said, I've been going into the field a lot. I've been going to all these locations where stuff is said to happen, and nothing ever happened. When I had the rock throw and the whoop, I think it moved me from like 20% or 30% to like 80. And then my sighting moved me to like 99% that Bigfoot is real. Tommy always asks me, my son always asks me what cryptids are real. I'm convinced that there are actual thunderbirds, because I think there's just randomly large birds of known species, just like there's randomly people that are abnormally large. So I think thunderbirds are real. I don't necessarily think there's a species of thunderbird, but I do think thunderbirds are real. I think the Flatwoods Monster was real because of the way Fred and Ed May described it. I don't believe in the 13-foot tall lizard creature, but I'm on board with what Fred and Ed May said they saw. So I would say when it comes to Bigfoot, I'm convinced they're real. I know UFOs are real. Um, Whatever they are, I have no idea, but I know UFOs are real. And everything else is kind of varying degrees of yay versus nay. Dogman, I think, is entirely occult related somehow. That's just like that's just my read on it anymore, given some of the weirdness that there's just patterns that those sightings follow that are very specific, and the more witnesses you interview, the more you see it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to briefly touch on some other stuff that Small Town Monsters is doing. You now have this publishing branch.
Mm-hmm.
And last year, the Dogman Triangle was released, written by Aaron Deese.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had him on the show last year to chat about it. Are there any new books that are on the horizon for the publishing side of things that you
Yeah.
can talk about?
For sure. We did the actually probably if you haven't read it yet, I think you especially would like it. We did a Kinderhook Creature book last year by Bruce Hallenbeck. And that's kind of your neck of the woods up in that part of the country.
Yeah.
So that's one we did. This year we're putting out Hunting Grounds by Aaron Deese, which is a follow-up to Dogman Triangle, but focused on Land Between the Lakes. We have a book by Jason Hewlett about Ogopogo coming out. Ron Murphy has a book coming out about mystery lights, which is like that is a subject that's always interested me a lot, like the orbs and stuff like that. I got to have the bizarre experience of looking for the Brown Mountain Lights with Micah Hanks and Shannon LeGros back in 2019. And I think that was kind of the impetus for me getting very fascinated by mystery lights. So those are the three that we're putting out this year. Don't ask me for titles on the other two because I forget them because we've only solidified titles in the last couple of weeks. But Hunting Grounds is the first title we'll put out this year, and then Monster Fest will be sort of the debut of Jason Hewlett's Ogopogo book. So, and then I think the Mystery Lights book will be like late, probably a late summer release.
Very cool. Very cool. Is there anything else coming up on the radar for STM? What's the future hold? Like, do you guys, are there any plans to shoot things and cover stories that are in other countries? I'm wondering, what's the scope you want to get to with this?
That's a big one. I mean, I would love to do things in other countries. We did BC last year, and that's how Ogopogo came about. But as far as like going overseas, the trick is always going to be, can we actually afford to drag 5 or 6 people to like France or something? Like that's always the big thing. Scotland would be a no-brainer. I would love to. I don't know when or if it will happen, just given the budgetary concerns. But yeah, for this year, it's going to be stacked with feature films because of the distributor delaying titles from last year. We only put out 2 movies last year.
Yeah.
So this year now there's going to be like 8 or 9. So it's going to be a lot. We've got American Werewolves 2. The Skinwalkers comes out on March 15th, and then On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Origin should be sometime in either late March or early April. I'm really excited for people to see that. It was a very personal project for me because my mom had just passed away in May when we made that. I shot that movie between her death and then her funeral. So it was like I had 1 week to go film this movie in between when she passed and when her funeral was. And that is the huge focus of that movie.
Yeah.
And then there's all the movies we have coming out this year. Lost Contact, Dogman Territory, On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Ancients, Cursed Waters, the Ogopogo movie, and Cryptid the Goat Man. Those will probably all be out at some point this year as well. Plus there's what we're doing. We're terming or calling them specials, but they're basically like a feature film that will be available like on YouTube and all of our streaming platforms at the same time. And the first one of those is the Phantom Lights movie by Tyler Hall that we're going to put out. And then he's working on another movie about mermaids in Virginia, which I'm absolutely fascinated about.
Yeah, that is really interesting for sure.
Yeah. So that's the film stuff. The episodic content is through the roof. We're making a series next week. Is it next week or the week after? 2 weeks from now, called UFOs Revisited. That is the brainchild of Aaron Deese, and he did a lot of the research alongside Heather, and him and Heather and Courtney are co-directing that one. And it's like a UFO. What are we at? 16 episodes? 18? 16? 16 episodes ish. 16 or 17 episodes that we're filming.
Wow.
And that's going to be like a round table style show about various UFO cases that will feature a lot of the STM crew, but then folks like Ron Murphy and Micah Hanks and Katie Page. So that one is coming up here soon. We've got more Beyond the Trail. We've got more Road to Discovery. Sasquatch Unearthed will have another season. On the Trail of UFOs will have another season. What am I missing? There's more.
Yeah.
There's a lot more. There's more than that. Strange Places is kicking off. I'm working on there's a series we're in the process of finalizing that I haven't announced or anything yet, but that's going to be done with the Wild and Weird West Virginia guys from here in West Virginia. So they're going to do a series with us as well. So there's going to be full steam ahead.
Yeah, 2024 is shaping up to be a very ambitious year, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really awesome conversation, Seth. Can you tell my listeners the best places to find STM online, any support that they can lend your way?
Yeah. Smalltownmonsters.com. The Kickstarter for our 2024 projects is still going on, ends on March 2nd, I think is the final day. And so the way we're doing the campaign is all the movies I already mentioned are part of the campaign, but the Ogopogo movie was not initially announced as part of the campaign. It's like a surprise 5th announcement. So if we can hit the stretch goal, which is 120, and we're right around 100K right now. So if we can hit 120, anyone that backs gets a free DVD or Blu-ray of that movie as well. So as long as we can hit our stretch goal, that will be happening on DVD. The movie's happening regardless. There seems to be like some confusion about that. The Ogopogo movie is happening regardless, but for us to actually put it on DVD and Blu-ray, we would have to hit like the stretch goal. So the Kickstarter is probably our biggest yet, but next year is going to be the 10th anniversary, so I'm sure we'll outdo it with that one. But yeah, the smalltownmonsters.com, all the social media that's out there, we're on, including TikTok somehow. So we're findable.
Gotcha. Great. Well, thanks again for joining me, Seth. And we'll have you back on sometime.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we'll see you at Monster Fest.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again to Seth for coming on the show today. Definitely glad to finally have him on. It sounds like Small Town Monsters is on a pretty ambitious release schedule for this year and have a lot of really cool stuff planned. It's awesome that STM is out there doing the groundwork, getting the stories, and really preserving all of this stuff for future generations and researchers to understand all the strange stuff that happens out there. So I will link their website as well as the Kickstarter in the show notes if you want to help them out with their upcoming projects. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone out there who listens to the Strangeology podcast. Those of you who have been with the show since the beginning, back in 2020, those who have joined along the way, and for all you new listeners out there. It helps out so much when you download the show, share it with friends and family, post it on social media. The Strangeology podcast really wouldn't be possible without the support of listeners like you. And also a big shout out to all of my Patreon members for their continued support of the show, which helps keep the lights running here at Strangeology HQ. And to any advertisers or companies out there looking to collaborate with the Strangeology podcast or would like to be considered for an interview on the show, please send all business inquiries to info@strangeology.com. All right, that's all from me for now. I'm going to take a quick break here, and Seth was able to hang out for a little while longer to chat about more strange experiences in the field, along with other strange experiences out there. You won't want to miss it. So, patrons, stick with me, and for everyone else, until the next time, take care of yourselves and each other, and keep it strange. All right, welcome back, members, to Strangeology Beyond, your exclusive portion of the show. Hope you enjoyed the conversation I had.